And you're alive.
Right. Hello, my name is Barbe Chambliss, and what I will be doing for the next period of time is reading to you from a compendium of nonviolent, a working compendium actually, of nonviolent responses to 9/11 that I compiled in the months just after 9/11, 2002, or 2001. So that you don't get lost in the amount of words, I would recommend a couple of things. One is you can close your eyes while this is going on because this is an audio message. Second of all, between each of these messages, I will be giving you a few seconds to just soak it in. So I will read an entry and then you'll hear. And that's your time to absorb, to soak in the contribution. Shortly after I completed my PhD dissertation on contemporary peacemaking, the terrorist attacks on September 11th, 2001 occurred in New York City and Washington, D.C. These attacks left us with choices. Our government chose to launch a war on terrorism. In my research, I had become convinced that there were always effective, nonviolent responses to even the most violent of acts. The ideas expressed in this compendium are nonviolent responses to the attacks. They come from important thinkers of all ages, religions, genders, and cultures. Taken individually, none of these ideas would yield the same immediate response that a war on terrorism attempts to yield. However, taken collectively, over time, these responses have the power to restore sanity, humanness, and safety to the world that we are leaving our children. So I'll begin with one that came across from by the way, none of these things, there was no social media that I was involved in at that time. And these things all came to me as emails or in magazines that I subscribed to or in personal messages to me. The first one comes from Barbara Kingsolver. Her advice is to grieve all losses equally. Surely, the whole world grieves for us right now, she said. And surely it also hopes we might have learned from the taste of our own blood that every war is both won and lost, and that loss is a pure high note of anguish like a mother singing to an empty bed. The mortal citizens of a planet are praying right now that we will bear in mind, better than ever before, that no kind of bomb ever built will extinguish hatred. The next entry is from the Dalai Lama. If you wish to experience peace, provide peace for another. If you wish to know that you are safe, cause another to know that they are safe. If you wish to heal your own sadness or anger, seek to heal the sadness or anger of another. Those others are waiting for you now. They're looking for your guidance, for your help, for your courage, for your strength, and for your understanding, and for assurance at this hour. But most of all, they're looking to you for love. The next entry comes from Yael Lachman, a weekly columnist for the Santa Cruz Weekly Good Times. And it's replace fear with love. What America has just learned, very painfully, is that we have not loved enough. We've cringed at gruesome wire service photos and turned our backs on the suffering of the world. We've allowed our own government to bomb civilians, withhold medical supplies, and sell weapons to brutal thugs in every part of the globe. Through our own ignorance, we've helped create a world where desperate people will gladly sign up to be the messengers of death. And now that death and destruction have reached our own shores. We must decide how we're going to respond, with love or with fear. The whole world is holding its breath, waiting to see which one we will choose. So which will it be? Love or fear? If you choose love, then you must act today to tell every person in a position of power that you will not allow our government to inflict more suffering in your name. The next entry is from an organization called Rawa, Revolutionary Association of the Women of Afghanistan. Differentiate between the deed and the doer. The US government and the US people should know that there's a vast difference between the poor and devastated people of Afghanistan and the terrorist, jihadi, and Taliban criminals. While we once again announce our solidarity and our deep sorrow with the people of the US, we also believe that attacking Afghanistan and killing its most ruined and destitute people will not in any way decrease the grief of the American people. We sincerely hope that the great American people can differentiate between the people of Afghanistan and a handful of fundamentalist terrorists. Our hearts go out to the people of the US. Down with terrorism. This is from a fellow by the name of Trip Mikich, an email that I received. Notice what is universal. After all, does a grieving mother or son or father or daughter or husband or wife look substantially different if they're wearing a headscarf or a turban or a Donna Karan suit or a Brooks Brothers suit? Grief, horror, despair, rage, fear, hatred, and love and tenderness and compassion, they all wear the same face, regardless of their geography. This realization is the fundamental key to the process of change. On the other hand, is someone any more or less dead when killed by a suicidal individual with box cutters than a highly trained and technologically supported individual at the control of a stealth bomber? It is only in a total rejection of both alternatives that real insight emerges and allows for a transformation of vision in a way that one views the world. This is from an article called Peace in the Cabinet by Joyce Weiner, and it was an article in Yes magazine. Establish a Department of Peace. Congressman Dennis Kucinich, Democrat from Ohio, is sponsoring a bill that would establish a cabinet-level Department of Peace. The new department would be headed by a Secretary of Peace and funded with $3.4 billion the equivalent of 1% of the Defense Department budget. HR 2459 stipulates that the Secretary of Peace conduct in-depth research on the impact of war and violence on civil society and develop policies to address domestic violence, school violence, racial and ethnic violence, police and community disturbances. This research would also focus on underlying social and economic factors that lead to violence. In addition to pressing for the domestic calm, the Department of Peace would act as a check on US military ventures and human rights abuses abroad. Before entering armed conflicts and during all treaty negotiations, the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense would both be required to consult with the Secretary of Peace. The Secretary of Peace would also sit on the National Security Council and would administer a force of civilian peacekeepers. He or she would monitor the loans and conditions offered by the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and would encourage conservation of scarce resources. If funded, the Department of Peace would include the establishment of a 4-year peace academy. Its graduates would spend 5 years doing community work and advocating nonviolence. It would also coordinate with universities to develop peace studies curricula. Replace fear with love. This is one called Feed the People. And the author is unknown, but you'll never forget her. My daughter Aini and I were walking in the woods today playing a game. She was pretending that there were monsters in the forest and that they were coming to eat us. We had to be vigilant and we had to defend ourselves. I asked her, "What's the plan? What are we going to do if we see one of these monsters?" She replied, "Feed them." "Feed them?" I said. "Yes," she said. "If we feed them, they won't want to eat us." I think she has the answer there. Imagine if George Bush took that $40 million that Congress gave him and used it to feed people. Heck, take $20 billion to fix up the US security and then to clean up what's happened in New York, and use the other half to feed people. And not just feed them with food. What if we decided that the people's spirits needed feeding too? What if we chose to take $1 billion and build the biggest, most beautiful mosque in the whole world, right in the heart of Kabul? And what if we gave it as a gift, no quid pro quo, as a place for people to feed their spirits? Or we could take Aini's advice and just feed people. And what would that get us? There's not a better way to rob the world of its anger and bitterness and jealousy and hatred than to feed people unconditionally. Feed their bodies, their minds, and their spirits. Build places of learning, places of spirit, places for healing and nourishment, places for community together. The next item is by Noam Chomsky. And remember, I think it's good to remember These were all written or created in the 3 or 4 months just after 9/11. An aroused public within the more free and democratic societies can direct policies toward a much more human and honorable course. Our paths are being chosen for us, and I fear they do not lead to any kind of moral high ground. We need to wake up. We cannot afford to continue to turn a blind eye to these matters. We will not find peace through the continuation and or escalation of our current policies. Following the attacks of September 11th, it is quite obvious that ignorance is no longer bliss. Ask yourself, why is it that almost impossible to find editorial material relaying real facts on our country's foreign policy in our media? Does that frustrate you? That these terrorist attacks are most likely attacks against a foreign policy that would not be supported by the citizens of our country? Were we to be made aware of what was going on? If we're not being informed of our country's actions, are we really living in a democracy? This one is from a woman named Doris Granny Haddock. She was a 91-year-old woman that walked across the United States talking about nonviolence. If you ask the common American to describe the America he or she wants us to be, you will hear this. We are the country that represents freedom and opportunity and fairness. We use our strength to help people around the world. We oppose brutal regimes and work toward world health and justice and democratic participation of all people. The Statue of Liberty is our beacon to the world. The common America wants the American government to be that every day in every corner of the world. The common American would never answer, America is this. We use our powerful military forces, intelligent forces, and our huge financial power to extract from weaker countries what we need for our own affordable lifestyles here in the US. We will support any brutal regimes so long as they provide us with the cheap labor and materials we need, and so long as they keep any competing political systems out of the region. We will finance the massacre of peasants and workers, the torture of journalists and clerics, and the rape of nature and the sky itself so that we may live pleasantly today in America. The common American feels ill at such words. And yet, that is the vision of America that many people in the world carry in their angry hearts. They see their miserable lives and their precious children and land being sacrificed for our luxury. They see our US-made helicopters and jets and guns and rockets suppressing and killing them. Naturally, they celebrate when we are made to suffer. The distinction between their perception and ours is profound. Our people are stunned at the idea that we are not universally loved. Plant something different. This was a contribution from me. I read today that there have been 400,000 Afghans killed by landmines in the late 90s. That's over 75 times the number of people killed in the terrorist attacks. I also read that there are an estimated 10 million landmines that remain buried there. I wonder what would happen if every time we removed a landmine, we planted an olive tree or a fig tree in its place. This submission is by David Corton, and it was printed in the Yes magazine of winter 2002. September 11th momentarily united the world behind an effort to bring the guilty to justice and secure the whole of humanity against future terrorist violation. It also focused attention on defining a choice between justice and vengeance, between compassion and violence, and freedom and suppression that may well determine whether we will have a world that works for all or a world that works for no one. Those who rule the United States in our name have responded by dropping bombs on one of the world's most remote and devastated countries, pushing through new subsidies and tax breaks for the wealthy in our country, rolling back civil liberties and gutting environmental regulations, while demanding that we yield to them our unquestionable obedience in the name of patriotism. It is a compelling, teachable moment, for the gap between those who rule and the needs of a deeply troubled world could hardly be more stark than now. The true patriot is the one who speaks openly at the gap and draws attention to real needs. This submission came from Thich Nhat Hanh. Listen deeply. If I were given the opportunity to be face to face with Osama bin Laden, the first thing I would do is listen. I would try to understand why he has acted in that cruel way. I would try to understand all of the suffering that had led him to violence. It might not be easy to listen in that way, so I would have to remain calm and lucid. I would need several friends with me who are strong in the practice of deep listening, listening without reacting, without judging, and without blaming. In this way, an atmosphere of support would be created for this person and those connected so that they could share completely and they could trust that they're really being heard. After listening for some time, we might need to take a break to allow what had been said to enter our consciousness. Only when we felt calm and lucid would we respond. We would respond point by point to what had been said. We would respond gently but firmly in such a way as to help them discover their own misunderstandings so that they will stop violent acts from their own will. This one is entitled Show Reciprocal Empathy and Mercy. Barbara Kingsolver's 5-year-old son asked these questions. Why did all those people die when they didn't do anything wrong? Will this happen to me? Is this the worst thing that's ever happened? Please, will this ever happen to me? Who were those children cheering that they showed for just a minute? And why were they so glad? There are 100 ways to be a good citizen, and one of them is to look finally at the things we don't want to see. In a week of terrifying events, here is one awful true thing that hasn't much been mentioned. Some people believe that our country needed to learn how to hurt in this new way. So which end of the world should we talk about? 60 years ago, Japanese airplanes bombed Navy boys who were sleeping on ships in the gentle Pacific waters. 3.5 years later, American planes bombed a plaza in Japan where men and women were going to work, where school children were playing, and more humans died at once than anyone ever thought possible. Thousands in a minute. Imagine. Then twice that many more died slowly from the inside. 10 years ago, early on a January morning, bombs rained down from the sky and caused great buildings in the city of Baghdad to fall down. Hotels, hospitals, palaces, buildings with mothers and soldiers inside. And here in the place I love the best, in this America, I had to watch people cheering about it. In Baghdad, the survivors shook their fists at the sky and said the words, evil. When many lives are lost all at once, people gather together and say words like heinous and horror and revenge, presuming to make this awful moment stand apart somehow from the ways people die a little each day from sickness or hunger. This entry comes from the Tao Te Ching. Practice humility. When a country obtains great power, it becomes like a sea. All streams run downward into it. The more powerful it grows, the greater the need for humility. Humility means trusting the Tao, thus never needing to be defensive. A great nation is like a great man. When he makes a mistake, he realizes it. Having realized it, he admits it. Having admitted it, he corrects it. He considers those who point out his faults as his most benevolent teachers. He thinks of his enemy as the shadow that he himself casts. If a nation is centered in the Tao, if it nourishes its own people and doesn't meddle in the affairs of others, it will be a light to all nations of the world. This comment is entitled Pray. And this comes from the saying of the Prophet Muhammad. If a man gives up quarreling when he realizes he's in the wrong, a house will be built for him in paradise. But if a man gives up a conflict, even though he is in the right, a house will be built for him in the loftiest niche of paradise. process emotions before charting a course of action. For the American people, I would suggest that we do everything we can to restore our calm and our lucidity before responding to the situation. To respond too quickly before we have much understanding of the situation may be very dangerous. The first thing we can do is to cool the flames of anger and hatred that are so strong in us. It is crucial to look at the way we feed the hatred and violence within us and take immediate steps to cut off the nourishment of our hatred and violence. Sometimes death comes in the dark, in the dead of night, but not this time. This time the day could not have been brighter or more beautiful. Sometimes death comes when we are by ourselves, but not this time. This time it came to those who were surrounded by friends and colleagues. Sometimes death comes on a battlefield or in a prison cell, but not this time. This time it came in commercial airplanes and pleasant office buildings. And sometimes death comes after a long struggle and much anticipation. But not this time. This time it came in an instant. And now that it has, you and I have work to do. Not the kind of work that sorts through the rubble or loads up body bags, thank God. Those who do that work deserve 1,000 tears of gratitude. Our work is of a different order, but just as important nonetheless. The work of anger, to be sure, but an anger tempered by wisdom. The work of grieving, absolutely, but a grieving that pays homage to suffering. And the work of justice. No question about it, but a justice of which every one of us can be proud. To get to grieving, we must go through anger. And to get to justice, we must go through grieving. Because, as the theologian Sam Keen so eloquently put it, every day we're not mourning is a day we will be taking vengeance. And vengeance is different, very different from justice. This entry is entitled Understand Root Causes. In classrooms all over America this week and last, teachers and professors asked their students, why do you suppose that some people around the world were so angry at us? Many students no doubt suggested that differences in religion might make some people intolerant and fanatically homicidal. What other reasons could there have been? In a West Virginia college classroom last week, a professor had something different to say. Look at it like this, he said to his classroom filled with honor students who couldn't imagine why America was under attack, except for reasons of religious extremism. Imagine that West Virginia was a third world country, he said. We have all this valuable coal, but there's one country far away that buys it all. They're the richest nation in the world, and they stay that way by getting our resources cheaply. They use their wealth to buy off our government officials and to kill or torture any worker here who tries to organize a union or clean up the government. How mad would we be toward that distant country? And just how innocent would we think its citizens are who drive around in luxury cars and live in elegant homes and buy the best medicines for their children? In other words, like living in a sparkling skyscraper. A life made affordable by the way they get resources from us. They admire their own democracy, turning a blind eye to what their government and their corporations do abroad. The classroom was silent. Well, he said, that's pretty much what we've been doing all over the world. Someone at the back of the room said, well, we may not be perfect, but this attack didn't come from Central America or Africa or Southeast Asia. It came from wealthy people from the Mideast for religious reasons. The class soon remembered that the US had supported the brutal regime of the Shah of Iran, so to better protect the supply of oil to the US, and that the brutality of the Shah led to the rise of Ayatollah Khomeini and the camp of violent Islamic fundamentalists, of which bin Laden was a product. The class was silent again. And then they began to discuss the problem, and they were in a good position to come up with real answers. This is an email from a friend named Sarah, whose last name is unknown. Save gas. I imagine many of you are feeling the same way I am. I want to do something that will make a difference besides reading and writing and giving money. Somehow Bush's plea to buy things just doesn't cut it for me. Here's something constructive we can all do. Save gas. Drive a more fuel-efficient car. Walk, ride a bus, or ride your bike, or take public transportation instead of getting in your car. While terrorist hatred of America is complicated, we know that one reason they hate us is because of our military presence in Saudi Arabia. Our military is in Saudi Arabia mainly to protect the oil fields there. Therefore, gaining energy independence must be an important part of our fight against terrorism. This one's entitled, Refrain from Bullying Back the Bully. Dear President Bush, our son is one of the victims of Tuesday's attack on the World Trade Center. We read about your response in the last few days and about the resolutions from both houses, giving you undefined power to respond to the terror attacks. Your response to this attack does not make us feel better about our son's death. It makes us actually feel worse. It makes us feel that our government is using our son's memory as a justification to cause suffering for other sons and parents in other lands. It's not the first time that a person in your position has been given unlimited power and came to regret it. This is not the time for emptying gestures to make us feel better. It's not the time to act like bullies. We urge you to think about how our government can develop peaceful, rational solutions to terrorism, solutions that do not sink us to the inhuman level of the terrorists. Sincerely, Phyllis and Orlando Rodriguez. And the last selection I've made from this compendium has an unknown author to it, but it may be my favorite. Hey, Taliban, give us Osama bin Laden, or we will take all of your women and send them to college. The last page of this compendium, the working compendium, was a page for the reader to offer up their own idea of nonviolent response, a nonviolent response to 9/11. And this, of course, was something that was being asked of a reader a few months after the attacks, when the emotions had not calmed down, when much of the listening had not happened. And we had not lived out the reality of the path that was taken, the war on terrorism. Now we have. So I urge everybody that's listening today to sit with your knowledge. So much information is coming out today about the impact of the choices we did make at that time. So I urge you to take that wisdom and mix it with your own sense of integrity and see if you have an item you would like to contribute to this compendium of nonviolent responses to 9/11. And now, if there are any comments, I'm more than happy to listen to comments, to answer questions if there are any. If not, we can all go home tonight and think about how we might respond to the next act of violence that comes our way. Thank you very much.